understand Western law, you have to understand St. Anselm's doctrine of the atonement. Amazing. What does that mean? If I'm going to understand Western law, I have to understand St. Anselm's view of the atonement, of Christ on the cross, and what that all means. Well, as a matter of fact, you do. And I'd like to take the remaining minutes to explain that. First of all, what did St. Anselm, who, as you'll recall, lived until 1109, what did he have to say about the atonement? What on earth does that have to do with Western law and the law of crimes in the West? St. Anselm was interested to answer the question, why did God become man? It's a good question. Why did it happen? Why did God not simply reconcile the human race to himself from heaven, just sending down a declaration directly from heaven? Why does the God-man come into the world? And St. Anselm tried to answer the question in this way, just using rational principles. He said that when human beings introduced sin into the world, they in effect closed off paradise to themselves. Now, God had intended people to enjoy eternal blessedness, but yet they've introduced sin into the world, and so in a certain sense, we can, in some sense, say that we've frustrated God's intention. So how are we going to make this right? St. Anselm says we have violated God. We have in effect committed an injustice against God. The scales of justice are out of balance. The order of justice has been torn by our wrongdoing. And that needs to be repaired. And it can't be repaired by God just saying something to us from heaven. It has to be really repaired by somebody. We cannot go on. There can't be any healing, so to speak, until justice has been repaired. How is justice going to be repaired? Well, the human race could be punished, and that could repair the damage. But for the human race to be punished enough to make good what has been done to God, the human race would have to be punished to an unbelievable degree to satisfy God's justice. It's not even clear we could do it. But even if we could somehow satisfy the demands of justice, the fact is that whatever punishment it would take to us to make good what's been wrong, the wrong that's been done to God, whatever punishment it would take would probably also deprive us of eternal blessedness. So God's intention would be frustrated again. So Anselm says, look, justice itself, justice in the abstract, has been assaulted by sin. How are we going to fix that? God could fix it by declaring it fixed, but he shouldn't have to do that. Satisfaction should be made to him. Now, human beings should make satisfaction to God, but they can't. They can't offer him enough that would satisfy such a devastating demolition, in effect, of the demands of justice. So what, in fact, has to happen for this ever to be healed? There has to be a God-man whose sacrifice can be punishment enough to, in effect, heal the rupture of justice. So that is, in effect, in a real nutshell, what St. Anselm has to say about the atonement. He's saying that when wrongdoing occurs, the only way we can make good on it is if there is some punishment meted out that is proportionate to the offense. Now, in the case of sin, the offense is infinite, and the one offended is infinite. So therefore, something infinite has to be done, in effect, to make satisfaction so that this breach of justice can be healed. Well, in that type of culture, where St. Anselm's views are being spread around, it's no surprise that the idea of the law of crimes is influenced by this, because people begin to say that if you commit a crime, in the same way that the human race committed a crime against God when the human race introduced sin to the world, if you commit a crime, you're not just wronging the person you rob or kill. You are wronging justice itself, the same way the human race wronged justice itself. And we could not make any progress, and we could not satisfy justice unless this breach is somehow healed by a punishment proportionate to the crime. Well, likewise, the Western law of crimes that we are very familiar with says, if you commit a crime against some other party, how are we going to resolve it? Well, we view it as you not only having wronged that person, but you have wronged justice itself, just as the human race did against God. How are we going to reconcile that? How are we going to fix that? we have to undergo a punishment that is proportionate to the offense, in the same way that, in effect, Christ makes the atonement. And this becomes sort of second nature to people in the Western world, but it comes directly out of St. Anselm's view of the atonement. So there is fundamentally a religious aspect at the very heart of the Western concept of law. Now, to conclude today, I said a little bit earlier that the concept of rights developed thanks to the Catholic Church, and that it reached its culmination in the 16th and 17th centuries, when Spanish theologians began to argue that let's consider what the implications of the idea of rights might be. Here we are discovering new peoples in the world. Those people have the same rights we do. We have no right to enslave them. We have no right to depose their rulers and install Catholic ones. We have no right to go to war with them simply because they are of different religion from what we have. And they have just as much right to own property as we have, because these are natural rights. They're not just Catholic rights, they are natural rights. And there we hear the voice of justice in the midst of a great deal of injustice that was visited upon the peoples of the New World. The voice of justice comes from the Catholic Church, reminding people there is one moral law and one set of rights that applies to everybody. And that's where we're going to pick up next time, the internationalization of the idea of natural rights. So join me next time for the Catholic Church, builder of civilization.